Chapter 3 examines sociological theory. Don't be scared, don't be frightened. Oftentimes students are afraid of theory because it's seen as difficult. And in one sense, theory is difficult because theory is seeking to explain what is going on. If you don't have theory, you just have a whole bunch of facts that have no explanation. So we talk about early on in the chapter the importance of climate change as a theory. It's not particularly a sociological theory in and of itself, but it's the idea that without climate change as a theory, we know that the icebergs are melting, that temperatures are rising, that there are a whole bunch of issues for society, but we don't understand what's going on. The theory is the important bit. The good news, however, is that sociological theory doesn't need to be complex, doesn't need to be inaccessible and difficult. And in this chapter, we've tried to make it as accessible and engaging as possible. And that's partly by breaking down what a theory is and recognising that explanatory component, by avoiding the theories that are badly written, that are very complex or inaccessible, and by really thinking about the core issues. There are three dominant strands of sociological theory that exist. They are known as functionalism, interactionism, and conflict theories. So functionalist theories are ones that basically argue that things happen in society for a reason. A bit like the human body has organs that are needed for the society to function, functionalist theories argue that the thing that is going on is needed for society to function in that way. Interactionist theories focus far more on how people interact with each other. They've also been called symbolic interactionism, and it looks at the meanings and the symbols and those kind of things associated with how people act in groups. And so the third is conflict theories. These really stand in contrast with functionalist perspectives because they take a much more critical stance. They're more likely to say that the issue that is being studied is a problem with society. So they focus more on issues of oppression, where one group is suffering at the hands of another group, or where society has negative impacts. So conflict theories are probably more predominant today in sociology than functional ones, or functionalist ones, but there still are those three core strands to understanding sociological theory. Within this chapter, we talk about three core levels of theory. So the first is big abstract theory, which we call grand theory. It's pretty much akin to philosophy. It's making big arguments and big claims, but they're actually quite hard to prove. They can be interesting, they can be provoking, but it's that grand theory which is really, really abstract. At the other end, we have micro theories. These get really down into the fine-grained detail of understanding a particular issue. So you can have a really complex theory to understand how people talk to each other or interact at a micro level. These are really interesting and important in their own way, but they don't connect back to that broader level. They don't abstract out of the data. The critique would be that you can't see the wood for the trees. In the middle, and it's the theories that we tend to use and like ourselves, we've called middle range theories. They are based on empirical studies, they're based on data, and we'll talk in chapter 4 about how to get that data, that tell us what is going on in society, and then we theorise from this. It's important as well that you're able to evaluate theories. You will have some theories that you like and engage with and enjoy, and that's important. Do spend time reading around particular theories at particular theorists and find out which theories you're more interested in. Is it those micro, is it those macro? But use those and snowball from that to find other theories and other kind of arguments that you enjoy. In chapter 1, we spoke about sociology being harder than rocket science or harder than physics in some ways because the target, humans, society, are moving, they change and they act differently in different conditions. The logical conclusion of that could be that sociology is difficult to write or harder to write. We don't accept that to be true. You can still write about sociology in ways that don't sound like nuclear physics. Actually, one of the things with theory, rather than using the long words, the long terms, it's harder to break it down and explain it simply. If you can't explain the concept that you're talking about, you shouldn't use the word. In this chapter, we highlight 5 key issues to identify whether a theory is a good theory. These 5 are evidence, explanation, applicability, testability, and predictability. The first is there needs to be evidence. As Christopher Hitchens once said, anything that can be asserted without proof can be dismissed without proof. So for a theory to be good, it needs to be supported by real empirical evidence. The second is explanation. It needs to explain something that is going on. If the theory doesn't add to your understanding of the issue, it's not really a good theory. The third is applicability. A theory that can be applied just in one context or just in one setting is not nearly as good as a theory that can be applied in different contexts, in different settings, that can be generalized. A theory also needs to be testable. If It's all well and good having an interesting and exciting explanation, but if there's no way to test whether it's true or not, that theory doesn't actually help much. And finally, a theory should be predictive or have predictability. That means by reading about the theory, we should be able to predict some kind of behaviour or change or social trend that's going to happen. If that theory isn't able to predict something in the future, even if sometimes that prediction will turn out to be wrong, it's not a decent theory. And so we really hope you enjoy this chapter on sociological theory. It is the underpinning of sociology, because without it you just have this bunch of facts. So take the time to read it, take the time to engage and read theory more generally, and hopefully you'll find your interest sparked and your sociological imagination really developing through sociological theory.